1988, the Soviet Union launched a space shuttle that orbited the Earth twice, landed completely on its own, and then was abandoned forever. 2 decades later, an explorer crawled through a collapsed roof into a secret hangar at Baikonur and found the ghost of a forgotten space race, a dusty white orbiter left to rot under falling concrete. The machine still held a secret mission profile nobody was ever supposed to see. That machine is the Buran, the Soviet Union's ghost in orbit. Steven has spent years chasing abandoned ruins, but nothing prepared him for what killed this program and what got buried inside it. A second flight plan, locked in a dead computer, about to come back to life. To understand how a machine like that could be forgotten, you have to go back to the height of the Cold War. In 1976, the Soviet Union launched the Buran program, a direct answer to NASA's space shuttle. Over 1,000 factories across the USSR poured their work into a single orbiter, and on November 15, 1988, it flew. Buran circled the Earth twice, traveled over 52,000 miles, and then landed at Baikonur completely on its own. No crew, no pilot, just cold, automated precision. And then it never flew again. Around a year later, the Berlin Wall came down. The Soviet Union collapsed. Funding evaporated. By 1993, the entire program was canceled. The vehicles were simply abandoned inside their hangars on the Kazakh steppe, left to decay in temperatures that swing from 40 below zero to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, in May 2002, disaster struck. The roof of Hangar 112 at Baikonur collapsed under heavy rain. 8 workers died, and the original Buran orbiter, the one that had actually flown, was crushed and completely destroyed. But 2 other orbiters survived, sealed in a different building called MZK. One was a test model, and the other, a shuttle nicknamed Tichka, meaning little bird, was more than 90% ready for its own mission. A second flight that was permanently grounded before it ever saw the sky. For decades, these machines sat in darkness. In 2015, a photographer named Ralph Meyerb slipped into the hangar and captured the first haunting images of the dust-covered shuttles. The world saw the photos, but nobody moved to save them. Steven saw them differently. He knew that if nobody acted, the next roof collapse would erase the last flight-ready Buran forever. So he assembled a crew, shored up the cracking concrete, and began restoring the airframe. Then he brought in Rebecca, an avionics expert who had spent years studying the Buran's lost automated flight systems. Her job was to wake up the dead computer and find out what the machine still remembered. When she finally powered on the old processor, the screen did not show a dormant machine. It displayed a fully intact flight plan, a mission profile for a second launch that was erased from every official record. The screen displayed a series of orbital injection parameters, a full sequence of engine burns that would carry the shuttle into a polar orbit. But there was more. Embedded deep in the code was a target designation Rebecca had never seen in any declassified Soviet archive, a U.S. military communications satellite, scheduled to be over the North Pacific on a very specific date, April 17, 1989. She ran the flight plan again. The mission wasn't just a follow-up test. It was a covert rendezvous. Once in orbit, Buran would match velocity with the American satellite, open its payload bay, and deploy something the files labeled as Object K. Steven stared at the screen. He had assumed he was restoring a failed dream, a silent memorial to a dead space program. But this orbiter was never meant to be a monument. It was a weapon. The Soviet Union had always denied that Buran had any military purpose. They called it a research vehicle, a technological marvel for peaceful exploration. But the truth was, the shuttle's robotic arm could just as easily grab an enemy satellite as deploy a module. And Object K, according to the system logs, was a self-contained jamming unit designed to disable the entire network of NATO's early warning satellites. Had it launched, Buran would have struck at the eyes of the Western defense grid. Rebecca pulled up the crew assignments from the mission manifest. The capsule was supposed to carry 4 cosmonauts, all with military ranks, none appearing in any public flight roster after 1990. Some of their names had been redacted from official histories, their faces scrubbed from group photographs taken at Star City. Whatever this mission was, someone wanted it buried so completely that it would never see the light of day. But here it was, preserved in a 30-year-old computer inside a collapsing hangar in Kazakhstan. As the team continued restoring the airframe, they uncovered physical evidence that lined up perfectly with the digital plan. In the forward compartment, they found mounting brackets for hardware that wasn't part of any known scientific payload, wiring looms that led to a compartment shielded with lead, and a single ammunition casing lodged under a floor panel Russian military issue from a facility that didn't officially exist. Then Rebecca got a ping on her laptop. She had been silently mirroring the old data onto a secure drive, and the moment she connected to the satellite internet to send a backup, an automated alert fired. Someone somewhere still had a monitoring node tied to the original flight programming, and that node had just woken up. Within an hour, the team's satellite phone rang. A voice in Russian gave a single warning: stop digging. The voice on the satellite phone did not repeat itself. The line went dead, and the screen on Rebecca's laptop flickered with an incoming data packet, a series of GPS coordinates, an older model of Iridium satellite ping, originating from a military relay station just outside Moscow. Someone with access to Cold War-era infrastructure was actively watching them. Stephen checked the perimeter of the hangar. Nothing moved in the pre-dawn darkness, but the feeling of being observed did not fade. He gathered the team around the avionics bay and gave them a choice: pack up and leave, report the findings to the authorities, or finish what they started. Every person in that hangar had risked their savings, their reputations, and in some cases their freedom to reach this point. They voted to continue, but they agreed on one condition: they would document everything, stream the final rollout live to the world, and make sure no one could bury it again. Rebecca dove deeper into the flight computer's archive. Beyond the covert mission parameters, she uncovered a second layer of encrypted files, obscured by a cascading key that required the original launch platform's authentication token. By manually reconstructing the token from the telemetry logs, she broke through. What she found made Object K look like a firecracker. The satellite targeting was a smokescreen. The true payload, buried in a subfolder labeled Project Vulcan, was a nuclear reactor-powered electromagnetic pulse generator. Once detached from Buran, it would drift into a permanent high-altitude orbit, and upon receipt of a coded signal, detonate a series of non-nuclear bursts capable of frying every unprotected circuit across the northern hemisphere. The plan was not to blind early warning systems. The plan was to collapse the entire electrical infrastructure of North America and Western Europe in a single, silent strike. And the date for the mission, April 17, 1989, coincided with a known period of maximum strategic tension. In those same weeks, a Soviet military exercise codenamed 79th Perimeter simulated a first strike scenario. Western analysts had dismissed the exercise as routine, but Rebecca's data confirmed that Buran's launch was timed to coincide with the start of that exercise. The shuttle would have delivered the weapon while the world was watching drill movements, not orbit insertions. The most disturbing find was a kill order buried in the system command logs, a line of code that, if activated, would instruct the weapon to fire its EMP burst automatically after 48 hours of mission success, with or without a human signal. It was a dead man's switch, a final guarantee that no recall order could stop it. The team sat in silence beneath the massive white fuselage. They had come to honor a beautiful machine that flew once and never again. They had stumbled into the architecture of an apocalypse that almost happened. Then the satellite phone rang again. This time the voice was different. It spoke in accented English and said, "You are not the only ones trying to find it. Others are coming. You have 24 hours. Then it gave a new set of coordinates, not to Moscow this time, but to an airstrip 50 kilometers north. The message was clear: finish your work or someone else will finish it for you. Stephen did not wait for dawn. The team worked through the night, carefully reconnecting power cells salvaged from an old Soyuz auxiliary unit. Rebecca mirrored every byte of the flight computer onto 3 separate drives, then encrypted one and hid it inside a hollowed section of insulation paneling. If anyone came to take the data, they would need to rip the ship apart to find it. They made a decision: finish the powered rollout, not a flight. The Energy rocket that once carried Buran was scrapped decades ago, but a full electrical startup, the first time since that single mission that the orbiter would light its own cockpit, run its own diagnostics, and face the sky under its own internal power. Stephen contacted a network of civilian satellite watchers and independent journalists, giving them a time window, nothing more. The hangar doors, last opened for a burial, would open for a resurrection. At 0700 hours, the massive steel door began to grind sideways on rusted tracks. Sunlight poured in, cutting through 30 years of dust. Inside the cockpit, Rebecca flipped the master bus switch. The analog gauges jumped, backlights flickered, and a synthesized voice, female, calm, unbroken, spoke through the cabin speaker. Primary systems nominal. Guidance platform online. Welcome, Commander. The shuttle did not know it was a relic. It believed it was ready to fly. As the tow vehicle pulled the 60-ton airframe onto the ramp, Stephen relayed the live feed. He spoke about the secret mission, the weapon, the kill order. The broadcast cut across open channels before any state actor could jam it. Within minutes, the images reached millions. Then Rebecca noticed something in the final diagnostic log, a maintenance entry stamped 3 days before the program froze in 1990. A technician named Dmitry Volkov had manually disabled the arming bus for the EMP generator's primary capacitor array and input a fault code that grounded the payload indefinitely. He left no report. He took the secret to his unmarked grave, but his act of quiet sabotage meant that even if Buran had launched, Object K would never have fired. One man, a low-level engineer, stopped the unthinkable with a single circuit break. Stephen looked up at the white fuselage, now catching the full Kazakh sun for the first time in decades. The ghost had finally spoken. The Buran program was canceled, its orbiters abandoned, but that hangar in Kazakhstan holds more than rust and bird droppings. It holds a reminder that history is never truly closed. One man's decision to flip a circuit breaker saved the world from something most people never knew existed. How many other near misses are buried in forgotten silos, unmarked folders, dead machines? We don't know because we rarely look. Stephen and his team looked. They found a weapon, but they also found a quiet act of heroism that rewrites the whole story. Every abandoned place has a memory. Sometimes it changes yours. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the ghost of the Soviet space program. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments, which abandoned relic should we uncover next? See you in the next one.